Bungie have been under significant fire from quite a lot of their fan base lately, and it's really a story that's been developing over a while. The monetization has certainly ramped up over time, but most importantly, the most recent expansion was a bit of a dud, and since then things didn't exactly go great for them. Now, as a part of that very broad wave of criticism, you have probably seen two slides from a GDC talk. The first slide says, first trust, then retention, then revenue. The second says, beware of over-delivery, you're creating patterns. Of course, these were surfaced in light of its newest expansion not being as good as people hoped, and a whole bunch of drama around the game, though those are but two slides from an entire GDC talk, which is why we went to the entire GDC talk, and that means that today, got quite a lot of things to share, including our sponsor. Brilliant. Get started for free and see the easy way to learn math, data science, computer science, and to do all that interactively with their fantastic site and app. And the first 200 to click my link will get 20% off for life, and with a 30-day free trial. Now, I did computer science in university, right? It was often so passive, sitting there in a lecture being bored, but their approach is fun and interactive, with thousands of lessons from the basics to advanced, and new lessons are added every month. As an example, do you want to dive in, learn some Python? Maybe the fundamentals of algorithms, right? You can understand big O notation, and then understanding that, you can see why certain parts of games completely tank your computer. Or you can dive into more emerging fields like neural networks. I mean, man, there's so much talk of like ChatGPT, all the AI stuff that's going on. Actually, I think that knowing how that technology works fundamentally is a pretty vital life skill for the modern world. Brilliant focuses on STEM topics that will get you the skills you need for high-paying fields, and you can learn with only 5 to 20 minutes a day. They meet you where you're at, they fit into your life, and active learning is proven to be 6 times more effective than just trying to sponge stuff in from a lecture. So get started free today. The first 200 go to brilliant.org/Bellular News. You're going to get 20% off an annual plan and a free 30-day trial. Okay, those slides came from a GDC talk given by the general manager of Destiny 2, Justin Truman, and this was in 2022. The talk was called From Box Products to Live Service, How Destiny 2 Transformed Bungie. Now, at this point in time, things are actually quite interesting. Even back in 2022, fans were rather outraged at the suggestion that Bungie weren't willing to give 100% of what they could to every single update. The idea that they could potentially be holding some things back based on this particular quote from the talk. It's hard to tell a team that has extra cycles and energy and want to do something amazing that would be amazing for the game. We should not ship this because this is an over-delivery that will set us up for failure on future trains. The implication here is clear. Destiny could do more for their players, right? That's how people received that. They don't even want to give you what they had given you previously. And to an audience seeing this in the year 2023, this is a clear sign of the crimes of Bungie, right? That they're failing to deliver, they are way over monetizing, and also Marathon exists, so I guess where that's all the PvP resources have went to. And these slides have featured in a great many of the sort of like takedown or video essays on the topic. Now, there's actually a lot more in that talk, and I would contend it's worth actually going into that. I mean, as an example, why is he talking about trains? What's a train? What's the next train? I think it's probably time to understand the totality of this talk. Context is Queen, in this case, the Witch Queen, because this talk was given 1 month after, I think, what many would consider to be their best expansion. I mean, certainly narratively it was their best expansion, the Witch Queen. So this is their best critical and commercial gear. You can see as well, GDC is pretty much just a month after Witch Queen came out. They're on an absolute high. From the perspective of Bungie at this point in time, they have solved live service. They've in fact solved live service so hard that a major console manufacturer wants to get in bed with them based on that strength alone. And that is the point of this talk. This happened at GDC. Ostensibly, it's a public event, but no, GDC is for game developers, basically. If you're there, it's to share information about game development, to learn from people who are doing that, to network and schmooze and do a little bit of business, all of that stuff. So, if you are making a live service game in the year 2022, the people you want to listen to are Bungie, because they've nailed their live service and they've even nailed their narrative as well. So, what they do in this talk is they go through the creation of Destiny 2, and this gets us soon to a rather shocking fact. So, they were obliged by their publisher, Activision, to release a sequel 3 years after Destiny 1. And the aim here was to take Destiny out of its niche, but also to keep the things that people loved. And in a way, you could say this worked. It had a meta score. Oh yes, 10 points higher than Destiny 1. But of course, Destiny 1, after years of support and updates, was a hell of a lot better than its meta score would suggest. And Bungie started to realize that something was going very, very wrong indeed. They started scrambling after about 6 weeks, because the hardcore players completely ran out of content. They started complaining, and shortly after, everybody else did. Destiny became known as a game that people were complaining about, and this is what happened to their user numbers, right? Here you see Destiny 1 weekly active users overlaid on Destiny 2 weekly active users. It's a little alarming that Destiny 2 is not that much, it doesn't really launch higher, does it? But what's really scary is where it goes, because it goes straight down, and you can see at the very end here that if you were to extrapolate the week-over-week decline rate, they would have been wiped out. Now, of course, I don't think anybody says they literally would have had no players in but a few weeks, but to them, it basically looked like, wow, if this trend continues, we'll be dead in a month. That's pretty bad news. At this point, it's February 2018, and per him, he says it was effing terrifying. And so this GDC talk is about this moment. It is about this bit of this graph where the red arrow is, and how they got from there to Witch Queen. And basically what they did is they had to change up their workflow, because Halo was a box product success for Bungie, which they define as critical acclaim, broad popular appeal, cultural relevance, high sales, and sustained player engagement. Destiny was not a critical success, but it had massive engagement. It couldn't really be a Halo-style box product success then. You can fix your reviews, fix your sentiment, fix your sales, as long as you have engagement, as long as you have a community of players who care and are passionate about your game. And this is where one of the big quotes about apathy comes in. The opposite of loving a game, the thing that will kill your game, is apathy. And the fundamental things are this. Halo launched after years and years of internal iteration to a complete success. It was a big box product success that was then followed by more content afterwards. However, Destiny was not that style of box product success. Instead, it had to be rethought, right? How do we turn this into a live service success over time? And this was basically all to do with community engagement and speed. And if you wondered why on that slide that we saw on all of the video essays, he was talking about trains, well, this is the analogy. This is where the trains come from. To stay afloat as a service today, you need to be constantly feeding your players, responding to their concerns, making your game better. If box products are in the business of over-delivery, so a box product comes out and it delivers so much that people are enamored, he says live services are in the business of constant delivery, that velocity is more important than position. To keep people not being apathetic, you need to keep them fed with content, and they need to see the velocity. They need to see that you are moving and that you are shipping content. Now, in a way, this could seem rather counterintuitive. I mean, come on, why not just release a good game straight away? The problem is, doing Halo again would be pretty damn hard, and as 343 Industries found out, yes, it is rather hard to get a Halo right, somehow. So the problem here is they're already competing with Halo and every other live service that's out there with its own established audience. And again, this idea of a live service and under-delivering and people not seeing velocity, think about what he said. Think about Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite is exactly the picture of a live service not doing those basic things. It under-delivered. That meant that the only thing that it could do is show velocity and have a great live service. It did not have that. It failed in both ways, And then Halo Infinite ended up going the way that Halo Infinite went, right? Basically, this means for them that live service success is finding a specific audience that sees potential and then building from there, where success is basically how fast you can build towards that potential and how much they can see it. And this is why Bungie also said that they wanted to be comfortable failing in public, showing like, look, we're iterating and we're iterating right in front of you. And this helped get Bungie the rep of a pretty damn open developer, right? They actually do tend to show you what they're working on. Okay, and this brings us to the first of the bad slides, right, in this talk, the slides that we've all seen. First trust, then retention, then revenue. And if you look at this outside of its original context, and especially not hearing the words of the guy who is giving the presentation, you're going to think of Tony Montana, right? In this country, you gotta make money first. Then, when you get the money, you get the power. And then you get the power, well, then you get the woman. And it's a Scarface thing, right? That's what it seems like. Destiny's plan for domination, getting the players under their thumb and just squeezing the money out of them. What this is in the GDC talk is more of a crisis plan. It's saying, okay, we need three things. We need money, we need retention, and we need trust. We can't get revenue without retention, and we can't get retention without trust. So in order to get to revenue, which we need as a business, we first need to earn their trust, then we need to retain them, and then they will pay for our product, right? So this is really formed as a direct response to the rather disastrous launch, and the idea that if they just extrapolated their graph out, they'd apparently have no players in 4 weeks, which again is probably an overstatement. I imagine that curve would have flattened out, but it was still a very, very spooky thing. So they decided to take these steps in sequence. Number one, they say it took a year to build trust in the talk. This involved getting the streamers and the hardcore people back on board, bumping some vocal pain points up in the queue for fixes, even if the team thought those are not the root causes of the problem. So this is actually one of those things where they know they need to show that, that speed in public. So even if it's just fixing a symptom rather than the core ailment, they were happy to fix the symptom. And look at, say, Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite actually took the approach of waiting to fix the core problem rather than trying to fix symptoms right now. I'd probably advocate for a balance of both, but obviously for Halo Infinite, it did not lead to that velocity that is talked about in this talk. And ultimately, players didn't trust 343. They were not retained by 343, and I think we all know that Halo Infinite is not the financial success that it probably could have been. And they even say that this involved cutting microtransactions and taking revenue losses in order to build audience faith. This is where I'll say, hello World of Warcraft, if you know my other channel. Anyhow, retention then could follow once players were willing to try the game again, and this for them is where the Forsaken expansion stepped up as the start of the second year of Destiny 2, where it was fixing up the end game and making sure that the hardcore players actually had stuff to engage with. Then what happened is Bungie, after that, took a look at revenue, right? Again, in line with things that people were asking for, which were removing loot boxes, moving to direct purchases, and adding free-to-play as an entry point. And you probably remember this period in time, right? Everyone was talking about, oh, Bungie freedom. And in a way, that period of Bungie freedom, yes, I think Shadowkeep was the first expansion that came out after they were truly free, and man, it really didn't have enough to it, did it? But it all culminated with Witch Queen, and when this talk happened, Witch Queen had just came out. So the notion of all of these things having gone broadly right and players being happy, that seemed to be very solid to them. Now though, trust, retention, and revenue all feel up in the air because the most recent expansion did not hit the mark. It kind of shattered their perception. It undid quite a lot of the work that they'd done to get players back. Now then, it's time to talk about train stations, not trains. So, why was he talking about trains in that slide that you probably saw, but, without sitting through the whole GDC talk, which, I mean, I can't really blame you. It's a GDC talk. They're pretty long and maybe a bit esoteric, and they're not really involved in, or related to actually sitting down, playing the game, and having fun in your pastime. So, The live service model is also part of why they wanted to redefine success in the wake of this game's launch. Quote, "You are building a train station, not a train. The seasonal model means that there are, at any time, half a dozen stations of Destiny 2 in development by a similar sized team as delivered Destiny 2 on launch. So rather than just, building a bunch of trains, and like, okay, we've built the train, let's build the next train and keep on going and going and going, they've realized, no, we need to build a train station. And, all this content will shoot through our train station that we have developed. So for them, success for a great train station, what does that mean? It means predictability. If your train comes early, you're screwed. If it's late, you're screwed. You expect it to be there precisely on time when it's supposed to be. And that for them means, to do a quote, scheduling rigor. It means no one has to do any heroics, that every season is broadly the same in terms of quality and content, and that's great for everyone, because the idea is it means the staff are not crunching, which, that they had, some criticisms of. And this is where, of course, we get to the other hated slide, and I mean, come on, man, this is such a bad look. I think this is one of those elements, right, where it's like, this is meant for other game developers to consume. This is not how you should word this if this is going out to the public. You don't want to say over-delivery. Hey, maybe just say, don't blow your load. I don't know, maybe if you make it a bit more crude, it won't feel as, like, evil and businessy. But it does look pretty bad. I think we can all agree. But let's actually go into what the general manager of Destiny 2 has got to say about this. So he says, but at the same time, and this is why this lesson is painful, so much of quality and delight in our craft comes from over-delivery, right? From giving folks stuff above and beyond what they expected. Certainly, as a World of Warcraft player right now, I'm seeing, like, Blizzard have a pretty good train station. Man, they have plenty of patches, they're coming out on time, but you know what they're not doing? They're not over-delivering. And to go to this idea here of kind of rehabilitating a live service games model, it's quite interesting, because Blizzard have lost trust, and they've lost retention, and, presumably they would have lost revenue if they didn't do some other things. Whereas the way that I see it now, they've lost trust from many people, they have earned retention from the most core people who are the least likely to go away, and then, instead of getting their revenue by earning more people's trust and getting more players, they seem to be earning more revenue by squeezing the microtransactions harder. This, of course, erodes their trust with their players, which then, in turn, makes it harder for them to, get retention, get, like, player numbers to go up, right? That's the kind of problem. Once your train station stops working, it's really bloody hard to fix the situation again. So we get this to keep on going, right? To quote, from giving folks stuff above and beyond what they expected. That's how you get people back in, get them excited. We still want that. We still want to delight and surprise and sometimes overwhelm our players, but we need to be mindful of patterns and the implied future commitments we've set for ourselves each time. So I think it's the idea here that a live service game is a marathon, not a sprint. Most players do expect that. So what happens if the team completely burns themselves out, has, the most incredible patch or whatever come out, and then they just kind of fail after that and stuff doesn't go the way that it should? Players won't be happy. There's certainly interesting examples in other games. I mean, FF14, I've seen a lot of people, even the core of that game's community, quite heavily criticize post-Endwalker, and a lot of the people who are more defending it will say, yeah, but look, Creative Business Unit 3 also had to do Final Fantasy 16. To the people who are playing FF14, what does that mean? I haven't played that game, and you've underdelivered in the MMO that I like, which is a challenging thing. What he then says is, this is tough, and this is the one honestly, we're still grappling the hardest with. It is hard, and this is where I get to the very dramatic quote from the top, it is hard to tell a team that has extra cycles and energy and want to do something amazing that totally would be awesome for the game, to tell them we shouldn't do this, it's an over-delivery that will set us up for failure on future trains. Again, it's the context that's important here. This kind of graph here, this is like the train station, and you can see all the little trains coming through it, and the whole point is that all these things happen perfectly on time. You can see how managing a game, you probably want something like this, where your players are always expecting this content to come out. Again, Witch Queen, big success, 2022, one of the game's biggest, most successful years, right? And it all went off the rails. So how do we deal with this slide? Well, I think there's a general understanding of this slide that is suggesting that Bungie had made a rather cardinal mistake, that they said don't over-deliver while they were under-delivering, because the vast majority of people who've seen these slides and know about this talk, myself included, by the way, and my team included, we only saw this slide in the context of a humongous cock-up with Destiny, because not only is the expansion a bit ropey, but even some of the technical aspects, having to do server resets, technical problems, bugs, etc., server issues, those things had all happened. So we literally, when things looked really bad, saw this slide, and you think, oh my god, they've lost their minds. Clearly all the resources are going into Marathon. Oh dear, this is bad. And it does feel that way, and none of this excuses the modern issues of the game. But the thing is that whenever this slide was delivered, and I suppose it's really funny, beware of over-delivery, you're creating patterns. Beware of making a slide like this. You are putting landmines down in front of you on the path, I think, because clearly the landmine was placed with this, and now they've only bloody went and walked into it, haven't they? So in 2023, the interpretation of this is a lot less favorable. Now, one of the things that could be left out of these conversations sometimes is the slide after that, which discusses the actual takeaway of the don't over-deliver statement. Because look, a slide like this, that's there as a kind of visual aid while someone's giving a presentation, right? So in the next slide, we actually got some more details. We need to understand how it will be repeated and whether or not we can do that repeating sustainably. And if we can't repeat that blueprint, or we don't want to, we need to make sure that the player expectations are set up to match ours. So this is less about delivering. So this is not really about delivering less content to people over time. This is about delivering content sustainably over a long period of time. But the problem is, this has a sort of, and this is always going to be the issue, there's no way to plan around this, but the implicit thing here is that by doing this, by being, beware of over-delivering, one could say, does that make you a bit defensive? Does that change how you're going to make some decisions? As an example, there's certainly, I don't want to say conspiracy theories, that's like too, I don't know, it sounds like a pejorative, it sounds angry, but there are theories, I think some of them related to how you can stitch the start and end cinematic together and they just kind of play as one, that have people think, hang on, is that the cinematic that's supposed to happen to start the new expansion, but you just split it in two and put a random story in the middle? I can't say that that's true, obviously. I have no idea, right? But this really did feel like a filler expansion. And I suppose if you're in this pattern, if you're in this like methodology of speedy but conservative and repeatable, does that change some of your creative decision making such that you're okay to basically greenlight a filler expansion? Like, maybe. And certainly you look at this expansion Beyond Light, and a lot of it is, I mean, there's some good gameplay stuff, yes, but you look at that narrative, and after Witch Queen, it's frankly embarrassing. It's very, very bizarre. It's just goofy, isn't it? It's one of those things you barely even understand, like, what the thinking was that went into it. So I would argue that they probably were doing a great job of player expectations, but here's the issue with this. The real danger is that you take away, the takeaway that you as Bungie have is that Witch Queen was over-delivering. Now, I think that if they were to hear me say that, they would think, oh, you're being uncharitable, come on, we can't do straight bangers literally every single year. This was a misfire, we're all going to move on. But one could certainly say, well, apply this logic to where we are right now. Clearly, people are angry because Witch Queen was so damn good and this wasn't as good. So even though you could see, you could see this video as a little bit defendy of Bungie, a little bit explainy of the problems, you can still see that I know what way he wants this statement to cut, but it definitely does cut both ways, and that has bit them very much in the arse right now. And I suppose that leaves us then with the Bungie paradox. They spent a lot of time talking to their players about aspects of the development process so that players really see all that dev communication. But this talk was not talking to the players. This was explicitly a GDC talk for the purpose of having other developers avoid mistakes. But because that relationship is built up with the audience, this is no different to the audience than any other time Bungie has said something to them. So this basically will feel like Bungie said, yeah, we don't over-deliver to you, sorry, which is going to feel really, really bad. And of course, all of this stuff, they probably felt safe saying this given how strong a position they were in. But now none of these words look good anymore. I think it's especially an issue here because the vast majority of players are not really going to look at all of the slides, watch the whole talk, right? Sort of get the full context. And so overall then, this is a humongous gotcha for Bungie. That's how it comes off. The idea that you did really well, the next thing was bad, and you did a slide that said, beware of over-delivering, which to a player right now, this is going to feel like the most doomer shit in the universe. Because you're just going to think, oh, clearly their takeaway will be, Witch Queen was too much. We should not be creatively good again. Instead, we will do more goofy bollocks. Now, I think to be charitable here, well, not to be charitable, I suppose my overall take here is I have to imagine Marathon probably disrupted things a bit. And as much as they're talking about, you know, the trains and everything, I've heard from a few people that Bungie are shit shows. And like, I'm talking about somebody I know who's like an actual game developer with like, you know, money in California. And people, you know, talking the rumors and the scuttlebutt. I can't confirm that, but you certainly look at this new expansion and you think, what the hell were they smoking? How did they think that Witch Queen should be followed up by this goofy bollocks? It is completely baffling to me from a creative perspective. And I suppose that's the thing. This is not a talk about creativity. This is a talk about content cadence and a reliable pace and velocity and all of that. It's not about the creative, you know, fire. And that's the thing. If Beyond Light was, you know, up there with Witch Queen, and they probably didn't go as egregious with the monetization, things probably would have been fine. But here's the problem. The trains have got to flow. And that is where one thing that I suppose I will try to contribute to this talk, this methodology, is fragility. And I think that's the big issue here. Because what is a train station? Kind of fragile, you know? One bad thing happens in the track, oh dear, now there's chaos. As I'm sure anyone who lives in Great Britain has somewhat noticed. It was very fun. We flew over to go to the Final Fantasy Orchestra, and yes, our friends from Wales just got caught in the rail strikes. But I do bring that up for a reason. Because these trains all have little teams making sure they're in the right place and the expansions are in the right place. So when one expansion is bad, where's the slack in the system? And I think now players are kind of realizing, like, well, we have these problems now. Actually, the problem we have now is we don't trust how good the contents of these trains will be. We want you to fix these things. We don't want this monetization to be like this, but this is a rigid plan. It is the train station running on its timetable, to use the analogy that was talked about in this talk. And I think that ultimately is why they ended up in a position of strength that ended up being rather brittle. Now, to win people back, thankfully, they do have the first slide. First trust, then retention, then revenue. What's happened right now? They've lost trust because they've went too hard on revenue when the creative quality of the game wasn't as good, and these things will probably hurt retention. So, trust. They got to think about that trust right now. And I suppose right now, well, they don't have the trust, and that means that players aren't going to give it to them. Pretty tricky situation. What have we learned from this? I think we've learned that we should be careful when we see slides. We should think about the original context, because in a way, this is not as bad as it seems without full context. But in properly exploring what we've learned is that a lot of this is, I mean, this here, put your players first, keep them, then think about earning your money. I think we can all get behind that. But goddamn, don't communicate it in such a way that is, liable to be taken out of context easily. Then again, that's the challenging thing. Game developers are not thinking about PR first, they're thinking about development. You know, I'm sure I could grab Thomas in here. We could talk about the continuous delivery, development methodology. People don't care about that. That's about the content at the end of the day, right? So there you go. That's basically the situation. Bungie have probably got to take some L's, revert some things in their store, and actually start playing for trust again, because they truly have lost it. But they need to not care as much, and hey, they probably have more financial latitude. You know, they had that large investment from NetEase ages ago. They've been picked up by Sony. Surely they do not need to think about line go up for the line god right now. Surely they can just take the feet off that and, you know, off the pedal on the money side, focus on getting the trust back, so that when the final shape comes out, Destiny players truly get the follow-up to the Witch Queen that they deserve, and also that the developers of Destiny get to pay off the thing that they have been working a very long time on. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to know yours, especially if you're playing a whole bunch of Destiny these days. As for me, well, I was going to come back for Lightfall because I'd heard so many of the strengths of Witch Queen, and then Lightfall got in the way of that plan. Well, here's to hoping that people get what they want in the future for the final shape. I'll see you next time.